After a screaming start to 2024, Nvidia's stock price is taking a breather. In fact, it's down roughly 20% off its June high. That might surprise some investors who thought Nvidia stock was an easy ticket to riches. It's a reminder that stock prices are volatile in the short term. With that being said, there have been many changes to the business outlook since I last made my Nvidia stock price prediction for 2025. The company released quarterly financial results, forecasting robust growth in revenue and profits for at least another quarter. Moreover, the 20% drop in stock price has decreased the company's valuation multiples. Those massive changes make it an opportune time for me to update my Nvidia stock price prediction for 2025. Now, to make this prediction, I will utilize analyst forecasts for Nvidia's earnings per share growth, apply the company's forward PE multiple, and calculate several possible scenarios for Nvidia stock. As always, I'll share with you precisely where I'm getting these numbers from so you can judge for yourself if my prediction is too pessimistic, too optimistic, or right on point. So, like I mentioned, one of the things I will need to make my Nvidia stock price prediction is the earnings per share forecast. Now, the analysts on Wall Street that are following Nvidia stock, they're forecasting the company will deliver $4.02 in earnings per share next year. Now, this is a good time to highlight that Nvidia's calendar year and fiscal year is different. Nvidia is currently in its fiscal year 2025, even though we are in calendar year 2024. Companies are allowed to have a different fiscal year from the calendar year, which creates a mismatch and is confusing, but they are allowed to do that. So that's why Nvidia's current year is 2025 and they say next year is 2026. I'll make adjustments when I'm making my stock price prediction. I'm making the stock price prediction for calendar year 2025. So next year, by the end of next year, calendar year, where will Nvidia's stock price end up? Interestingly enough, the analysts on Wall Street have raised their earnings per share forecast for next year. 7 days ago, they thought Nvidia was going to deliver $3.59 in EPS next year. They've upgraded that by more than 10% to $4.02. And this comes following the company's earnings release where they reiterated their robust outlook and forecasted continued growth in revenue and profitability. And so the analysts saw this and they said, well, we think earnings are going to be better than we thought. Surprisingly, even though those analysts and the earnings per share expectations have risen in the last week, Nvidia's stock price has not. In fact, Nvidia's stock price is down meaningfully in the last month or so, and it's been down even after the solid earnings release. Nvidia's stock price is trading at $102 per share as of this recording, and it's down roughly 20% from the highs it reached in June. Nvidia's stock price is one of the inputs I will use to make my stock price prediction. I will also need the growth estimate for Nvidia's earnings per share for the next 5 years, since I will need Nvidia's earnings per share for calendar year 2026 or its fiscal year 2027, because I'll be using the forward 1 year price to earnings ratio to calculate my estimated stock price. So I'll need the earnings per share 1 year ahead to make my stock price prediction. And interestingly enough, the analysts also have increased Nvidia's earnings per share outlook for the next 5 years. They now expect its EPS to grow by about 52% over the next 5 years. This is up from around 45% they were expecting in EPS in the last month and a half or so. So over the next 5 years, the outlook for Nvidia's EPS growth has increased, even though it was already really high. A 45% EPS growth for 5 years is really phenomenal for a company the size of Nvidia, but to increase that to 52.5% is really robust for the next 5 years. But it's not like Nvidia hasn't done this before. Over the previous 5 years, they increased their earnings per share by 66%. So this 52% would actually be a deceleration from their previous 5-year earnings per share growth. The other number I will need to make my stock price prediction is Nvidia's forward price to earnings multiple. It's currently trading at a forward price to earnings of 25.73. This is the forward PE I will use to make my stock price prediction for Nvidia stock. All right, so now that we have our inputs, we can go ahead and make our stock price prediction for Nvidia stock. And I wanted to share with you my previous stock price prediction for Nvidia stock for 2025 I made on July 1st. In this forecast, you'll notice that the earnings per share for 2025 expected was $3.63 with a growth rate of 40%. In the new forecast, the earnings per share expectations have risen to $4.02, and I'm applying a 41.5% growth rate for Nvidia stock for the next year. And I'm using this 41.5% growth rate that's expected for next year for Nvidia stock. I could have used the 52% that's forecasted for the next 5 years, but I'm adjusting it downward because the rate of growth is already so high and it's so difficult to achieve this kind of earnings per share growth, especially for a large company. So because of the degree of difficulty, I'm choosing the lower EPS growth estimate, the one that's expected for the company next year. I'll apply it for another year after that. So I'm applying a 41.5% growth rate. Still, that growth rate is higher than my previous stock price prediction growth rate I applied. And you'll also notice that Nvidia's forward PE, the last time I did this video, was 34.56, and that forward PE has fallen to 25.73. And you'll notice my previous stock price prediction 2025 target for Nvidia stock was between a range of $175 per share and $200 per share. So now let's take a look at my model for earnings per share for next year for Nvidia. You'll see here $4.02 expected EPS. I got that number from Yahoo Finance. I shared with you where I got it. And if I apply a 41.5% growth rate to that $4.02 EPS, I get an EPS for 2026 of $5.69. So if we apply the 25.7 forward PE multiple to the $5.69 EPS, we get a stock price of $146 per share by the end of next year for Nvidia stock. Now that would be a nice improvement from the $102 per share the stock is currently trading for as of this recording. Still, the forward PE multiple might rise again to 30 or over 30. And if it goes to 30, the stock price could rise to $170 per share. If the stock price goes to 35, the stock price could rise to $199 per share. If the stock price forward PE actually declines, which is entirely possible, the forward PE falling to 80 would mean the stock price would end the next year at $102 per share. So even in the worst case scenario I have modeled here with the forward PE multiple declining, the stock price would be flat in the worst case scenario that I have modeled, right? There are worst case scenarios that I have not modeled, but according to this model, the worst case scenario is Nvidia stock price remaining flat. Now that's because I'm not adjusting or changing the EPS expectations. The EPS expectations are what will change Nvidia's stock price more so than the changing forward PE multiple. If earnings per share for some reason are much lower or trending much lower than we have forecasted here, then that can have huge negative consequences for Nvidia stock next year. And one of the reasons why that could happen is if one of Nvidia's rivals starts to gain market share in the AI accelerated computing space. Now, there are several that are aiming to take some market share, and there are some custom-made chips that are coming into the market. So if those rival chips start to take market share away from Nvidia in a meaningful rate, which I don't expect to happen given how far ahead Nvidia is vis-a-vis its competition, that could bring down the valuation. However, I don't think that is the most likely scenario. So where do I think is the most likely scenario given all of these scenarios I have modeled here? Well, I would say a forward PE multiple in the range of 25 to 30 would be a reasonable scenario. And I would say the stock price by the end of next year of between 150 and 170 per share. Now you'll notice that's lower than my previous estimate of 175 to 200 per share, but it's also a better rate of return because when I previously made that estimate, the stock price was well above $120 per share. So the price was more than $20, $25 higher when I made that prediction a couple of months ago. And now at $102 per share, I'm forecasting or I'm targeting the stock price will be at $160 per share at the midpoint at the end of next year. All in all, given these changes from 2 months ago to today, I'm more bullish on Nvidia stock because as an investor, you're getting a company with higher earnings per share expectations and you're paying a lower price to earnings multiple. Previously, you were paying a forward PE of 34.56 2 months ago when I made that price prediction. Now, the stock price is at a forward PE of 25.73. So you're getting more in terms of earnings per share and you're paying less for it. I love that scenario. I love when I'm getting more profits in return for a lower valuation. Those are the type of situations I love to invest in. And so I'm more bullish on Nvidia stock today than I was 2 months ago, even though I've lowered the price target from 175 to 200 down to 150 to 170 for the end of next year. Did you know that over 90% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed? It'll really help support my channel if you hit that subscribe button. And oh, by the way, one of the benefits of being subscribed is that I take requests from subscribers more often than I do from non-subscribers. So if you prefer that benefit, please subscribe to the channel.